Hello again, everybody. This is Ed with Call Me Mr. Broadstreet, my latest video, which I'm reviewing the documentary Wingspan, which I'm going to hold up right here. Now, before I get really in depth with the interview, first I just want to say again, special thank you to the Two Legs podcast. Thank you to all the new subscribers. I last took a look earlier today, up to 34 subscribers. I mean, this is beyond my wildest dreams to have that many subscribers right now, and just I want to welcome everybody who's new to the channel, and of course thank you as always to folks who continue to watch the channel. Please feel free to just look around at all the other videos that I have. And a little bit of a housekeeping announcement. So I've picked up some new equipment which I hope to be using within the next few weeks to really kind of amp up the quality of the sound on the videos, as well as the videos themselves. So that's been some recent purchases. I'm very happy about that. It's just going to take me a little bit of time to kind of get up to speed with everything. I've been filming everything off of my iPad, so it's kind of a bit of a, learning curve for me, as it were. So just bear with me, but within the next few weeks I should have higher quality videos up. The plan is to maybe go back and refilm some of the older episodes as well, kind of really tighten everything up. So that's something to definitely look forward to. Just wanted a special shout out to, my family who's definitely, contributed to that. Thank you so much. Again, just thank you all for watching. I appreciate it as always. Again, if you enjoy the content, please make sure to give a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. So with that, let's go into part one of the review, which again is Wingspan, the documentary. Now this was released in May of 2001. I remember it premiered on ABC TV at the time, and I want to say it was, it's 88 minutes on the DVD, and it feels like it was done in two parts. I'm trying to remember when I watched it, but being that it was on ABC, certainly a big event, of course, and the DVD came out later, so I'm just going to show that again, in front of the DVD. It's been out of print, so a little bit tougher to find, and it's been supplanted by some of the archive releases and other things as well. So that's the back of the DVD right there. What it just says is 88 minutes of footage, which is the documentary. Really, the documentary is about hour and a half, give or take, going through the entire story. Special features include 22 minutes of unseen outtakes, promotional videos of Jet, Rockestra, and Let 'Em In. I'll get into those in the interview itself. In-depth discography of Paul McCartney and Wings, and a 100-picture photo gallery, including many rarities. Now, I'm going to be referring a lot to my notes. But real quick, where I rank this in terms of whether it's essential, whether it's good to great, whether to pick up next, or whether to pick up last, I would put it at good to great. I'd give this, if we're going by the American grading system, probably a B, a very solid B for this. Just a little bit of comparison. I like to compare things that are very similar. You know, the McCartney years that came out in 2007. I'll do a separate review. This is a collection of the videos. Of course, we have Wingspan right here, which is 2001. If I'm going to tell somebody to pick up either one of these at first, and they're both out of print, by the way, as of the filming of this review, I'd steer them more towards the McCartney years as a first purchase, but I would definitely direct them towards the Wingspan documentary as a quick follow-up purchase if you're getting into Paul and Wings. So I'm going to go into the documentary itself a little bit. Again, please bear with me as I'm looking down at some notes while I was rewatching the documentary, just to try to get a little bit of a flavor, get some scenes that I liked, some little criticisms. I think nothing too major, but to kind of start off before I really dive into everything, it's definitely a love letter to Linda. Let's not forget that Linda had passed April of 1998. This documentary comes out in May 2001, so, maybe 3 years, if that, since her passing. So, of course, she was on Paul's mind. I'm sure she's always on his mind. I mean, she was a great, amazing wife, mother, co-singer, with the band and everything. So, just to really, we miss her. We miss her not being in the overall Beatles family. It was done with the interviews with Paul's daughter, Mary. She's the one interviewing him throughout the documentary, spliced with all the different footage that they put in. As other folks have pointed out, I believe it's been pointed out by certainly by the Two Legs podcast. I think the Talk More Talk podcast has kind of touched on this as well. I'm almost positive you all have touched on this. Folks have kind of said, well, it's a little bit myopic. I guess the best way to put it is, okay, Paul's being interviewed by Mary, who he certainly seems comfortable with, but maybe having an objective interview, a little minor criticism. The other thing is we really don't hear anything from any of the other members of Wings. There's no interviews with them. There's no then current interviews with them in the documentary. So it would have been nice to get their perspectives, especially since, we have a couple members of Wings that have since passed on, not just Linda, but Jimmy McCulloch back in 1979. And since this documentary, Henry McCulloch, no relation, as the guitarist on Red Rose Speedway. So it would have been nice to get some of their perspectives, even just a few minutes here or there over the different eras would have been welcome, I think. So again, that's where the somewhat minor criticisms go. But again, just still a very solid piece, still a very solid documentary. So as we go in, goes in a chronological order. Goes a bit to the Beatles breakup. Again, as I mentioned, Paul's being interviewed by Mary. Paul's telling his daughter Mary, okay, this is where I met your mom, during the time of Sgt. Pepper at the Bag of Nails Club. Kind of a very familiar story that we've all heard, at least the more hardcore fans out there have heard. There is, again, warm chemistry between Paul and Mary, although, again, it's very subjective. You're being interviewed by a family member. It's going to be different than if it was somebody, I'm trying to think of who did the anthology interviews. Totally blanking right now on the name. Oh, Jules Holland. I think he did some of the interviews. So someone like a Jules Holland, for example, who's also a musician, but might get you to open up a little bit more, but still at least a little bit objective. But again, hindsight's only 20/20, as they say. He also relays a story to Mary about near the end of the Beatles, Yoko had actually bought a bed into the studio as she was having some medical issues. Mary acts surprised at this, but I don't think it would have been her first time hearing that story. I mean, again, that might have been played up more for dramatic effect. That's just, my view on it. Take it as you will. Little grain of salt there. Going into Let It Be, of course, the whole Let It Be period. So, 13 minutes in, and we finally do kind of get up to 1970. About 20 minutes into the documentary, there's a nice little just modern shot of Paul walking along the beach. I think that could have been near Mull of Kintyre. That's what it looks like, their house up in Scotland. Also the name of the 1977 song that Paul did with Wings. 30 minutes in, we kind of get into 1971. Okay, they're making Ram at this point. Also a little bit of the name of Wings, of course. It came during the birth of Paul's and Linda's second daughter, Stella. Wings. That sounds like a great name for a band. So again, a very familiar story that some of the hardcore fans have heard before. Goes to the launch party of November 1971. Two folks that showed up to the Wings launch party, Ron Wood and Elton John. Wonder whatever happened to those guys. A little bit of humor in there for you. But, they had a big launch party for Wings. Of course, the band's just starting. Okay. About 33 minutes in, we're getting into 1972. Henry McCulloch joins the band. They go into the 1972 University tour. And I'll kind of pause it here for a second. The 1972 tour, it feels like to me that Paul's kind of recreating from about 10 years earlier when the Beatles were playing the Cavern. He's wanting to get back, as it were, to use an overused pun. He's trying to get back to basics. He's getting back to the beginning. Okay, let's just tour the universities. Just show up, hey, do you want to hear the new band play? I think definitely a smart strategy. They're a newer band. It's not comparing Paul as much to the Beatles, and I'm sure that was, the factor in it. You get some cool footage of the old Wings bus from 1972. As a little aside, I think someone's trying to restore it. I think they found it, and it's all derelict in bad condition. rusting away somewhere. So, as we go through, nice little clip I noted about 40 minutes in. Some fan had mailed seeds to Paul. Well, he plants those, he gets busted because they're marijuana seeds. I mean, I don't think when you get seeds from a fan, especially in the early 70s, that you're going to think they're tomato seeds. Just a funny little clip, that's all. Wouldn't be the last time that Paul would get into a little trouble for that either. But I get a little bit ahead of myself here. 43 minutes in, we get to 1973. We get to Live and Let Die. They kind of go into that, that video, of course. So again, we're going chronological. The story about Linda writing the middle part of the song. For the more casual fans out there listening to this, yeah, she did write that little middle reggae part of the song. Some of the more hardcore fans, I'm sure you're aware of that, but kind of an interesting little fact, regardless, to put out there. They next go into Red Rose Speedway, My Love, about 49 minutes into the documentary, so it kind of goes along quick in some respects. The other day it was funny because I was talking to my dad and my stepmom, spending some time with them, and my dad actually mentioned the Henry McCulloch guitar solo on My Love, how Henry just came up with a guitar solo from one of the takes right on the spot like that. I thought that was always very inventive. Again, very much like No More Lonely Nights. I think a lot of similarities between the two songs. So I think that was just kind of a nice moment. I got to chat with my dad about, again, probably about a week and a half ago at this point, or a week ago at this point. I asked my dad, do you have a favorite Wings album? He said, no, not really, no favorite Wings album. I'm going to do a little spoiler. Mine is Back to the Egg. That's my favorite. I'm definitely going to get to that in another review, but just a little bit of personal back and forth as we were discussing things while I was together with family, which is really nice. Next section, we get into Band on the Run. Well, somewhat familiar story, probably to a lot of people out there. They decide, let's record in Nigeria. By this point, it's down to the trio again. Denny Sywell and Henry McCulloch, who had previously joined the band, they decided, no, we're not going to go with you guys. Okay, so it's Denny Lane, Paul, and Linda. Paul goes into the famous story about the studio not being fully built down there. Studio's not constructed, so, okay, they have to make do with what they have. They did get mugged down there, Paul and Linda walking around late at night for a friend's house. Car pulls up. They pull a knife on them and, give me all your jewelry. Some of the tapes that Paul had went missing for Band on the Run, so they had to re-record stuff. Who knows what happened to those tapes by now? They're long gone, long recorded over. Who knows? Even Paul comments himself in the documentary, maybe the guys just re-recorded over it and going, yeah, let's get some real music on here. So kind of a funny little moment, but, definitely a rough session to say the least. We then kind of segue into the one-hand clapping special. We get some footage from that, which would later be released on the Band on the Run archive set later on from 1974. We get Jimmy McCulloch joins the band, and he was the guitarist. Jeff Britton on drums. That was just a very brief lineup. They go into Junior's Farm. Junior's Farm is one of my favorite Wings tunes. It just rocks along very nicely. It's 1974. It's kind of just the single follow-up that Paul has in between Band on the Run from 1973 and Venus and Mars, which would come in 1975. Just a really rocking tune. Always has been one of my favorites. Jimmy's guitar on that completely shreds. Just really does. Really one of my favorite tunes, of course. Paul goes into a little bit of, Jeff Britton really didn't fit into the band with the rest of the personalities. He makes kind of a Pete Best analogy, on why they didn't last long. The personalities don't quite meld together. That can happen in a group sometimes. You get people with different humor, or of course you get, let's say, a group of 5 people. 4 people are really together and hitting it off. The 5th person, they're not hitting it off as well. The personalities aren't matching. That happens, not just in music, but in life. But anyways, we go segueing into Venus and Mars next. So now at this point, okay, Wings is touring the world again. You're getting to see them kind of climb to the top of the mountain again after the breakup of the Beatles. They have a nice little clip, actually, There's, Paul. So you get Paul, Denny Lane. By this time, Joe English had joined the band as the drummer. Jimmy McCulloch, Denny Lane. So you get, everybody doing a nice, really nice version of Bluebird. They're kind of just jamming together. They're sending this video because the Japan tour, the Japan concerts scheduled for, I believe, 1975 or 1976, got canceled. This is in reference to Paul's previous pot bust from the early 70s. So they do a really nice, clip to kind of send out to the Japanese fans, going, oh, we'll see you guys next time. Well, they would and they wouldn't, so we're going along in the story. Some of you hardcore fans, I'll pause at this moment, you know exactly what's coming. But for the rest of you, stay tuned, as we're kind of going through the documentary a little bit. 1976, we get the Wings Over America tour. Okay, great. They're back on top, they're touring. It's like Beatlemania all over again. So that's kind of the feeling that they're going with. You see it, you see the trucks, you see the footage from Rock Show, you're seeing all this, all the crowds lining up. Okay, Paul's made it, he's back on top. By this point, he's had some top 10 hits, some number 1 hits. They're an unstoppable force by this point. There's some really nice Rock Show footage as well, which that would later get re-released onto DVD. I'll get to that in another review, but the footage looks nice for at least the time frame for the 2001 documentary. But again, get to that much later. So they're back on top. We go into 1977. Okay, funny little story that Mary kind of says to Paul is, Paul's going, oh yeah, I'd be writing a song telling you kids, hey, I'm being serious, I'm composing. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but Mary would just be like, oh, come on, Dad, we're watching TV. Paul would be like, no, this is really important. The kids kind of back and forth, like, yeah, come on, whatever. We want to watch some TV. We don't care what you're doing. Kids don't realize what parents do for a living. Hey, doesn't matter if you're a rock star or anything else. Story that never changes, I'm sure. So it kind of melts into the London town era. We get Jimmy McCulloch departing Wings. You get Mull of Kintyre. That becomes a major hit in Britain. Doesn't do as well in the U.S. I think Britain, I know it went to number 1. U.S., off the top of my head, I want to say maybe somewhere in the top 40, that it didn't connect with the audiences. I don't think that's mentioned in the documentary itself, but, they kind of mentioned that, okay, releasing Mull of Kintyre, it's now 1977, you have punk rock taking off, so kind of the juxtaposition between essentially a Scottish waltz and punk rock. Think of the Sex Pistols as punk rock, two very, very different styles. A brief clip of Paul getting the Guinness World Records for most records sold. I think it was a rhodium disc, which is rarer than platinum. But they do a brief clip of that. They go into the birth of his son James at this time, is born, hey, adding to the family. Paul and Linda's final child together. Okay, great. So now we flip over into 1979. Quick, brief clip of the I've Had Enough video from 1978 plays. Okay, we're getting introduced to 2 new members. Great little clip of Arrow Through Me from the video gets played from the Back to the Egg album. Steve Hawley and Laurence Juber. So they join the band. Okay, so now it's Steve Hawley and Laurence Juber, Denny Lane, Paul and Linda. Let's see here. Nice little quote from Paul. He'll say, I'll meet some fans who say that their favorite album is Back to the Egg. Yeah, it's my favorite Wings album. Some of us prefer that to Band on the Run, as hard as it might be to believe for some out there. What can I say? They go into the Tom Snyder interview. I actually covered this a couple weeks back in a little bit more depth, but they have the December 1979 brief clip of the Tom Snyder interview that they did. So Wings are doing the series of concerts in December of 1979. Okay, we're coming to the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. Now, this is where I take a little bit of issue with one of Paul's lines. He says at this particular point in the documentary, well, we were tired of another lineup. They set out to do what they did. Okay, we're another hit, another tour. I'm going to push back a little bit on that, only because he never addresses well, he addresses one thing a little bit, the Japan bust. But also I think the death of John in December of 1980 really puts a lot of more pressure on Paul, obviously personally losing his best friend in such a violent way. So I think those two factors, if those don't happen, I think we might have had Wings a little bit longer. And to be honest, I wouldn't have minded seeing the Back to the Egg lineup at least make one other album together. It's just kind of a shame. They did actually do a little collaboration during early into 1980, with some tracks, and into the early 80s. Paul appears on a couple of tracks on one of the albums. I think it's Standard Time, and it could be either Laurence, Juber, or Steve Hawley. This is where I'm mixing up some of my facts a little bit, but basically they did work together a little bit in the early 80s, but it wasn't under the Wings name. Spoiler alert. So we go really quick into 1980. Of course, there's a Japan bust, January of 1980. Quick little side note that is not covered in the documentary. So Paul brings in a huge, fist-sized bit of marijuana into Japan. Big no-no, especially since they're about to do a tour there, all this promotion, everything else. Again, something not covered in the documentary. Almost 4 years to the day, in 1984, Paul and Linda go on a vacation in, I believe, Barbados, if I'm remembering correctly. Gets busted for pot. It wasn't Paul this time, it was Linda who kind of takes the rap. It's a lot less than a fist size. It's probably a couple of joints that they get busted for. Fly back to England, Linda pays a fine. That's how that last marijuana bust went. But backtracking a little bit to the 1980 Japan bust, okay, so he's bringing in this huge, giant fist size of pot, spends 9 days in jail, which couldn't have been too pleasant. The documentary does not cover this, but I think Paul wrote about a 10,000-word essay not too long after the experience. To my knowledge, that's never been released. That's been put in a safe somewhere. I don't know if we're ever going to see that manuscript. We may at some point in the future, who knows? Or that just might be buried in the McCartney archives somewhere. We don't know, but I thought that was an interesting little note that I wanted to add that the documentary really didn't cover. We got kind of a final clip of Winter, Rose, Love Awake. It's kind of a nice little video of Paul and Linda. Linda's riding on a horse, and it's near the castle where they recorded Back to the Egg. It's kind of snowy, very dreamlike quality. So that's kind of nice to get. Paul says, well, at the end of Wings, I wanted to spend more time with family. The family is breaking up. But really, the activities kind of prove otherwise. I mean, I understand the sentiment, but again, a little bit of pushback on some of the documentary. Okay, so Wings effectively break up in 1981 with the final theatrical release of the rock show film, which was done in 1976. That's April of 1981. We backtrack a little bit. December 1980, John is senselessly taken from us. So those factor in. But of course, Paul was still busy recording throughout the 80s. So it wasn't like, okay, we're just going to sit and raise you kids. Yes, I'm sure there was plenty of time to do that, to spend with family in between projects. But think about it for a second. You've got Tug of War from 1982, Pipes of Peace from 1983, Give My Regards to Broad Street from 1984, see up above, Spies Like Us from 1985, you get Press to Play from 1986. 1987 brings the All the Best collection with the UK release of Once Upon a Long Ago, and the B-side, which is Back on My Feet, which is a co-write with Elvis Costello. No new music in 1988, and then 1989 we come around to Flowers in the Dirt, and Paul tours behind that album. So a lot of activity during the 80s for a time when he was just sort of taking a break, taking a step back to be with family. As I said, I'm repeating myself, I know, but yeah, I'm sure there was time to spend with family as well, but quite a lot of activity. So you're just getting 1981 and 1988 as the only 2 years in the 80s. We don't really get any new material from Paul. So he was still keeping up the workaholic pace. So that's where I push back a little bit against that particular narrative in the documentary. Just my view, anyways. So that's kind of just a little wrap up of the documentary itself. Going to go into some of the bonus features, a 22-minute interview. Just real quickly, Paul does some different discussions on different topics. Bird watching as a kid, so kind of some nice little interview clips that didn't make it into the documentary between him and Mary, kind of goofing off a little bit as well. This is all B-roll stuff for the most part. Spanish omelets. He used to make Spanish omelets for Linda when they were living in New York City a little bit. This was probably during the Ram sessions. He doesn't specify the time periods with any of these. Cross My Palm with Silver. Well, that's kind of an interesting one. A little story where the Beatles and Kinks are touring. So psychic, Paul visits a psychic during the tour. She goes, well, you're going to meet someone who's blonde and you're going to have 3 or 4 kids. Sure enough, that's what happened. So that psychic was pretty accurate. Nice little story about going into Harlem. 1964, Beatles are touring. They're saying, no, you don't want to go into Harlem because of any, perceived issues, prejudice, problems, however you want to frame it. But he says, well, finally in 1970 or thereabouts, okay, I finally went to, got to go there. By this point, Paul's kind of doing recording sessions for Ram, got the longer hair, the beard. He's probably not very recognizable, at least to a lot of people. They're just taking the subway, to see the Apollo. Paul's like, look, we admire a lot of the, black singers out there. Hey, let's go visit the Apollo. This is like, it would be like me going to Strawberry Fields or me going to Abbey Road. It's a place you just want to see. You're amazed by how much artistry came from there. So just kind of a nice little clip of that, I think. We also get a little quick story about the Life magazine photograph, the whole Paul is dead thing. So what happened was Paul was kind of angry at the intrusion. Basically, it's 1969. You've got the Paul is dead theory. Paul and Linda are retreating up to the Scottish countryside, to Paul's farm up there, kind of get some privacy. Paul was just not very happy with the photographers, throws a bucket of water at them, but he goes, well, wait a minute, that may not look good. The Life photographer comes back, they talk a little bit, they get one shot of Paul, Linda, and I know Heather's in the shot. I think Heather's holding like a cane, kind of like very protective, which I thought was very interesting in that shot. If you look it up, you'll see it. I'm sure some of the hardcore fans have already seen it, and if you're a little more casual fan, go ahead and look it up. It's kind of just a little interesting photograph. Just an interesting little side story. Another funny story entitled Sunglasses. Paul's on a cruise one day, I'm guessing early to mid-70s. He's wearing these mirror shades on a cruise. This one older woman gets annoyed, saying, well, you take your shades off. He's like, no, I don't want to. He's wanting some privacy, I guess, on the cruise. So kind of fun little clip, that one. Another little funny little clip, Peace and Love, War and Hate. Paul just goes into a little story about back in the early 70s, American musicians to be a little bit more serious. This is probably where they're auditioning for Ram, kind of coming through, and one musician, after he auditions, just says to Paul, okay, peace and love. Paul just shouts back with a bit of British humor, oh, War and Hate. He realizes, wait a minute, this musician might take it the wrong way. He goes up and says, it's just a joke. It's just a little bit of weird humor, Those English and their weird humor, what can I say? Let's see. Another interesting little story from the bonus footage. Nashville Gum. So Paul and Linda go to visit the Grand Ole Opry. This would have to be about the time of Junior's Farm in 1974 when they're recording. They went with Johnny Cash. Interesting little side note is that with Johnny Cash, they did end up recording a track with him in 1988 called New Moon Over Jamaica, which is from Johnny Cash's 1988 album at that time. I'm blanking on the title, but just a little interesting piece of knowledge and trivia for all you hardcore fans out there. Paul says at the time they went to visit the Grand Ole Opry, I'll say around 1974. Lots of artists had gone there, performed. He looks under the seats and there's all this chewing gum. So I guess artists, would chew their gum, kind of stick it under the seat or whatever, go up to perform. So he says he looked down and looked through, and just like a cosmic scene of just dried up chewing gum. Funny other little story about lasers. Lasers, of course, being used in the shows in the mid-70s. Paul relays, I went to see Goldfinger, so he thought lasers would cut someone in half. well, Wings were using the lasers during the 1976 tour, but Paul thought, before they used the lasers, what happens? Do you think, well, they cut you in half? He mentioned seeing Led Zeppelin, and he thought, Robert Plant, he's very brave, just sitting there. That laser could cut him in half. He's up on the stage at Earl's Court. So just very, some very good footage with that. Sort of getting to the end here, and I apologize for the length of the video, but just really enjoy trying to relay everything that I saw to you. Songwriting Unplugged, so we get just a couple of little quick bits of songs performing with Mary interviewing Paul, Picasso's last words. We get the whole Dustin Hoffman story about how Paul composed a song just from reading about Pablo Picasso's death from the night before, or from a magazine article. Paul performs a little bit of Let Me Roll It, and then Mrs. Vanderbilt. So we get that as well. We get some exclusive performance footage as well as part of the bonus features. We get Jet from Rock Show. Again, a little lesser quality than on the Rock Show DVD. We get the Rockestra video. This is actually exclusive to this DVD. Right now, this is the only place you can find that video, legitimately at least. I'm really hoping that they will release the London Town and the Back to the Egg archive sets. We want those sets, believe me. Fans will buy it up. I know I'll buy it up in a heartbeat. We get another video clip of Letterman from Rock Show. Quick discography from 1970 to 1980. Get a photo gallery of 100 slides, which is kind of nice to see, a nice little bonus there. There's a little history section where you can go year by year from 1967 to 1979. And this just brings up various photos and chapters relating to the year. So you can just kind of navigate over, and you're going to pick up, this is a photo, this is a little video clip, everything that's already in the documentary. Kind of a nice little setup. So that's my overall impressions of rewatching the Wingspan documentary. Again, a solid B. I think, really well done. Again, I think in some ways it has been superseded by, of course, the McCartney years from 2007. The archive sets coming out are bringing us a lot more video. I'm hoping that continues. Again, I would love London Town, Back to the Egg. I'd love Press to Play, and of course give my regards to Broad Street. And I think Off the Ground. I think those would be also great sets to bring out and to complete the audio and visual record of Paul, certainly from 1970 all the way up to Flaming Pie. So that's it for the, at least this portion of the documentary. Next video is going to be a review on the soundtrack itself. So we had a 2 CD soundtrack, as it were, collection of songs from Paul. I'm going to review that, review some highlights from that. I really enjoy that album as well. But thank you all for listening and bearing with me. Again, some really great, amazing upgrades coming in the next few weeks as far as audio quality, video quality. I appreciate everybody for listening. All the old subscribers, all the new subscribers. Please be safe. Just be kind to one another. And again, if you enjoy the videos, just remember to give a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next video, which will be the Wingspan 2 CD set and some other little nice pieces of memorabilia. Until then, I'll see everybody later.